same day that President Obama visits the families of those killed at the Oregon campus shooting last week, another gunman shoots 4 people, killing 1 at an Arizona school. But now the president has a new gun control plan that wouldn't need Congress's approval. Also, Russia is ramping up its bombing in Syria, but it's also having serious problems with its aim. Is Russia getting itself into its own quagmire that it won't be able to get out of? Then a tale of 2 parties, how the confusion over the next Speaker of the House is exposing a huge rift in the Republican Party. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And once again, we start the show, unfortunately, with the gun problem in America. Another campus shooting, another visit by the president to grieving families, and another day where the gun control debate is raging in Washington. Now, to show you how contentious this issue is, if you need another reminder, these are people in Oregon protesting President Obama as he visits the families of people killed at Umpqua Community College. That's happening as police in Flagstaff, Arizona, investigate yet another campus shooting.
Multiple people possibly shot.
An emergency call at another college campus. 4 people shot overnight at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff in a parking lot near a dorm. One of the victims dead. The 18-year-old gunman now in custody. Police say he opened fire during a student brawl.
2 separate student groups got into a confrontation. The confrontation turned physical.
As the victims of this latest school shooting remain in the hospital, President Obama is in Oregon meeting today with the grieving families of the 9 killed in last week's massacre at a community college. The White House says the president is looking into using executive actions to expand background checks for gun purchases without waiting for Congress to act.
The president's team is hard at work on them, considering what other options may be available to the president to try to keep guns out of the hands of criminals.
Most Republican presidential candidates say the focus should be instead on mental health. This morning, one of the top polling candidates, Dr. Ben Carson, he's defending his recent suggestion that part of the solution to mass shootings could be more guns, including at schools.
In fact, if I had a child in the school, I would much prefer that there be somebody who is trained on that campus rather than just leaving them at the mercy of some individual who's lost their senses.
All right, losing our senses. All right, let's bring in our panel right now. Shelley Mayer, Democratic Assemblywoman who has all her senses, representing the great city of Yonkers. Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Okay, first off, the president's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, Dom. If he doesn't go to the district, he's unfeeling. But if he does go to the district, he encounters protests here because it's a subject of guns. Should the president, he says this is an issue whose time it should be politicized. I get it. I happen to agree with it, regardless of party or politics, but obviously a lot of folks don't. He's not running for another election. Does he lose anything by doing what he did today in Oregon, or if he goes to Arizona, or if he goes to wherever else to put a face on this issue and to show that, yes, this is high time, that if at least the executive office does something about it?
He doesn't lose anything, he being defined as the president, but there will be blowback, if you will, or pushback against the Democratic Party, perhaps a little down the road. But Richard, what is the #1 job of the president of the United States? I mean, to my recollection—
The welfare of the American public.
Thank you. The welfare of the American public. So he must do something. Think about this. One of the victims in Oregon, a 44-year-old disabled woman who was going to class, and she had a guide dog, I believe a guide dog. She was one of the people that was killed. And you're protesting because the president is coming, has the audacity to show up and show sympathy in private with the victims? It just seems on a political level to me to be extremely disgusting. And something has to give, because nobody's going to stand up to the NRA.
And we know the interaction on this issue time and time again. Andrew, there's been a new element, if you want to add to it, a potential of an executive order by the president. We know how those things have gone. One side says this is an imperial president trying to go around the will of the people, or at least going through the chamber of Congress. On the flip side, tell me what gets done in today's Congress if the president doesn't act unilaterally. How does this play out?
Well, in terms of the actual practice, it might play out well in that some of these executive orders might actually lead to some
And this
changes.
again for background checks.
Right, that prevent further shootings, and we might be able to see examples of, oh, here's a situation where hopefully things turned out for the better. So you have an opportunity to show that some of these gun control suggestions that are being shot down, pardon the phrasing, by the other side, actually have a chance of doing some good and actually working. But the politics of it, it's the combination of the pro-gun groups out there, including the NRA and just pro-gun supporters, plus the larger group of people who just don't like President Obama and will oppose him for whatever he happens to do. I think a lot of those protests that we saw today were just anti-Obama protests and protests that were fearful of gun control policy coming into play. I don't think they were necessarily offended that he was showing up there. So, the political blowback, as Dominic said, will be significant. Democrats are either going to have to fight it or they're going to duck out of the way.
And I think, from my thought, someone is Democrats can't be half pregnant on this. And if you listen to what Governor Cuomo said, and there was some criticism, it's easy for you to say you're doing it in New York, but you got Harry Reid and other Democrats saying, we're going to hold things up unless they have a voter. And they won't shut the government down, but it made for a good soundbite. But either they're all in or they're not. And it seems so often on the national level, at least, Democrats can't figure if this is the third rail or they should believe the polls that the public really does want things like background checks in overwhelming numbers. You think this election cycle they're going to be either all in or not?
Well, I think there's several things going on. I think the president is trying to change the political dynamic on this issue and create grassroots sentiment in states where politicians are afraid to take the position that he's espousing. And I think what he's trying to do, and I really think that women are key to this, that women in those states, and I'm not talking about New York, I'm talking about states like Oregon and Idaho and Wyoming. He's trying to legitimize people to say, no, we're actually gonna put our foot down about this. He's trying to create the groundswell, and I give him a lot of credit because he can do it and he must do it. And it's not Democrats running scared overall. It's those that want to be reelected in states with a very powerful gun lobby, have great political risk when they come out on the other side. And I think he's trying to create the groundswell where they are either going to do the right thing and be safe or do the wrong thing and lose. So I think it's really about the politics more than anything else and the national election and the Republicans making the Republicans sit in a corner where they really are unwilling to do anything to address this problem. To Dominic's point, they don't have a single suggestion.
No. You have a fascinating melting pot that is Yonkers. You got a little bit of everything there. And I'm curious, especially in the aftermath of Sandy Hook, and now you even see politicians on the Republican side who want to be president saying, give the lunch lady a gun here, give the kindergarten teacher a gun, as we just saw Ben Carson say, and others. When you go out and you do town halls, you'll meet with different constituents after a tragedy. We saw one in Yonkers claim the life just today with the finality of Mr. Nolan, a minor league pitcher here, in a senseless drive-by shooting. Is it just that they're the loudest voices to people screaming for guns in all places, like schools, but they don't represent a big population? What do you hear when you go out that might surprise folks sitting at home?
Well, I think one thing is credit, as I've said before, to Governor Cuomo. When we did the SAFE Act, one of the smartest things he did was he went fast. And he really outplayed the other side. I think if we had waited any longer, they would have out-organized and put pressure on people, not like myself, because for me it's a vote I had to make, but for people in more marginal districts, Democrats in more marginal assembly districts, more conservative districts, they would have had time to organize. So yes, even in my district, I had 1,000 against it to 100 in favor in emails after I voted for it. 1,000 against it in my district.
And do you think that's reflective of the district's feelings, or it's just the most passionate people on this issue are the ones that are loudest, the ones that email your office, the ones that get active on the issue? Which one is it?
Well, I think they were organized. There's a lot of passion out there on both sides, but this is where basic community organizing is so essential, and this is what the NRA has done exceptionally well. Everyone who is a member gets an email. Email this person. Well, they happen to have emailed me too late. I had already voted. But even if they had emailed me earlier, so be it. But that's what they do. And then if you're running for re-election this November and you say something now, they are going to get 5,000 emails to your Assembly or Senate or congressional email account, and it influences policy.
And I
It's
think
the
even more
power.
chilling, right, for those who are thinking of maybe doing it, but they're worried about a primary. And they're worried about a
Absolutely.
finance primary on the other side.
Absolutely.
If they dare break ranks and do anything, even like background checks, which I say every night, but it's true, 75% of NRA members support universal background checks, and more than 90% of Americans overall like the idea. But even that's too risky a move for some because of the threat of the NRA.
The threat of your own seat and primary. It's not the global numbers of people who support. I think that's the challenge, and that's where the power of organizing. We have to out-organize them. And the president is trying to light a fire, in my opinion. I think you agree, Dominic, in
Definitely.
getting those people to speak up.
And Richard, with the Assemblywoman, her point, key word, organizing. Mr. Obama, the president, said exactly the same thing himself the day after the Oregon shooting at the White House, in which something that you and others at this table have been talking about for a very long
But
time.
here's what's missing, Dom. Did the president get with Bloomberg and say, okay, instead of you going off on basically your own mission here on guns, laudable though it may be, you're going to be spending hundreds of $millions of your own money, basically financing your own, basically PSA out there. Let's put these funds together. Let me find 5 or 6 of the guys like you here and make a big pot here, and we're going to go after these specific, battleground states. We're going to try and make these issues. We're going to make these conditional platforms if people want money from the DNC or whatever else, just like the NRA does. It just seems that everybody's got their own agenda. Some people
Everyone
want to
does.
say something out loud. Some people don't. Sometimes it's the wrong messenger saying the right message or whatever else. Say
Richard,
whatever you will. The NRA, they're like, it goes through us. The message goes through us. This is basically the litmus test. You don't do it, we're going to find somebody else who's going to run against you.
But Richard, the point that the president made the day after Oregon is exactly, I think, the point that you and others have made. For an elected official, it really should come down to, from a public grassroots point of view, who do I fear most? Do I fear that? Right now, they fear the NRA most.
Yep.
Because they know you go against the NRA, it's a wrap. You're done. But the other side of that argument should be, I've got, like MAD, you talked about MAD and the women and so on, organizing. You got to have that same type of effort along with the Bloombergs and the money on the other side saying, if you don't go against the NRA, you're done. This will be your last term in Congress or whatever state or
And to that point, I know I've made this point before, but the last time Gallup polled on this, there was majority support against gun control. More people opposed gun control than supported it. So the American public isn't decided on this, and the grassroots aspect of this, yes, the politics need to be in play here, but there also needs to be a campaign of educating and trying to win hearts and minds of the public.
I got to hit a break here. When we come back, there's a lot going on in Albany, and the Assemblyman's going to tell us what's going to happen next. It's an educated guess here. Who the heck knows lately? Preet Bharara, he's under fire how aggressively he's going after corruption in Albany. We'll ask if some of his critics have a point here, or is his role important for the process to change the culture in the Capital District?